I sat alone in the lobby of the Seabright Palms Hotel during the New Year's vacation I had paid for in full, watching my children link arms as they led the whole family to a lavish dinner, leaving me isolated on a cold chair. I heard them whisper clearly, "Mom is nothing but a burden." My throat tightened, my eyes blurred, and I quietly opened the folder I had prepared. When the bill for thousands of dollars was shifted directly into their names, those arrogant faces froze. And that was only the beginning of my fight for justice. My name is Evelyn Mercer, 66 years old, living in Tampa, Florida. I had worked as a freelance accountant for many years, used to dealing with numbers, invoices, paperwork, and all the little details other people usually overlooked. Since my husband Thomas passed away 4 years ago, life had become unbearably quiet. The spacious home that once echoed with family laughter now only held the sound of the TV and the ticking of a wall clock. I still walked around the neighborhood, still baked almond cookies for church on weekends, but there was always an emptiness in my heart. Maybe that's why Aaron's phone call, my eldest son, 3 weeks before the trip, moved me to tears. His voice was cheerful. "Mom, we're planning a New Year's getaway for the whole family. Aaron, Paige, Caleb, Lila, the kids, everyone. You'll come, right?" My throat caught. All I could whisper was, I really want to." Aaron went on describing the Seabright Palms Hotel, a well-known beachfront resort with a saltwater pool, a luxury spa, and a wide seafood menu. He said the trip would be a chance to reconnect, like the old days, when Thomas was still alive and we used to have picnics at Clearwater Beach. My heart leapt. It had been so long since the whole family was together, not a strained dinner or a frosty Christmas, but a real vacation. But then, in a tone I knew too well, Aaron added a small detail. "Oh, Mom, we figured it'd be easier if you booked the rooms under your name. Everyone will just pay you back afterward." Just a formality. I froze. For years I had been the one stuck holding the bag, paying for summer camp flights for the grandkids, booking hotels for family reunions. The money rarely came back as promised, if it came back at all. I bit my lip, but my heart softened. I wanted to believe this time would be different. I wanted to believe this trip would be the chance for me to be recognized as part of the family, not just the quiet shadow trailing behind them, so I called Seabright Palms. The friendly receptionist read off the packages: 5 oceanfront suites, 7 nights from January 2nd to January 9th, including 3 buffet meals per day, spa and pool access, plus tickets to a seaside jazz night. The total cost stunned me, $4,200. I drew in a deep breath. I checked my bank account. Just over $800 in savings scraped together from bookkeeping jobs for a few small shops and selling almond cookies every Sunday at the church fair. The rest would have to go on my credit card. The hotel required 50% down immediately, $2,100. That night I tossed and turned, staring at the wedding ring I had kept in a jewelry box for 41 years. I remembered Thomas sliding it onto my finger under the church arch, his trembling voice promising to stay with me for life. The next morning I brought it to Mr. Feldman's jewelry store, a Jewish man who'd known me since my youth. He looked at me with sympathy. "Evelyn, I can only give you $800. The market these days." I swallowed back tears and nodded. I didn't need more. I only needed enough for the deposit to hold the reservation. When I hit the payment button, my heart felt both heavy and light. Heavy for losing something priceless. Light because I believed I was doing the right thing for my family. I told myself, at least this time, they'll see I'm more than just the cook, the babysitter, the cleaner. I am at the center of this vacation. In the days after, I worked harder than ever. Took on extra bookkeeping contracts, cut every expense, walked instead of calling an Uber, ate peanut butter sandwiches instead of proper dinners. I scraped together enough to cover the balance. I printed every confirmation and slipped them into a blue folder, carefully labeled. That was the accountant in me, and also the way I tamed my worries. I had no idea that the same day Aaron called me, a WhatsApp group called No Drama Getaway had been created. In it were Aaron, Paige, Caleb, Lila, and messages that, later, would crush me. But at the time, I just sat smiling in my empty kitchen, picturing the whole family at the beach, waves mingling with the kids' laughter. I thought maybe Thomas, from heaven, would be smiling too. As departure drew near, I packed carefully. A few summer dresses, a light cardigan, my old but comfortable sandals. I even prepared a tin of almond cookies, planning to give them as gifts. The night before, I set my suitcase by the bed, looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "Thomas, please let this time be the one where our family is truly happy." Early the next morning, I went to the airport with everyone. They were cheerful, busy with their phones and designer luggage. Only Madison, my 17-year-old granddaughter, turned to ask softly, "Grandma, are you tired? Want me to pull your suitcase?" I smiled, my eyes stinging. In that moment, I felt that at least one person truly saw me not as a burden, but as a person. 3 days after I sent the deposit, the confirmation email from Seabright Palms arrived. On the screen, reservation confirmed. 5 oceanfront suites, January 29, 2025. I read it over and over, my heart pounding like I'd just signed a major contract. To me, it wasn't just a vacation, it was proof I had a place in the family. I printed all the documents, organized them into plastic sleeves, color-coded tabs, blue for rooms, yellow for meals, red for spa. The accountant's habit had never left me, and now it gave me comfort. I pictured my son and daughter-in-law nodding at my careful prep. Mom's always overthinking, but thanks to her, everything runs smoothly. That thought warmed me. The following days, I lived frugally to the point of austerity. I turned off the heat earlier, wearing 2 sweaters. I walked to the market through the biting December wind instead of calling Uber. Dinner was only vegetable soup and dry bread, meat only on Sundays. I told no one, complained to no one. I treated it as the necessary sacrifice, proof of my love. One night, while sorting receipts, I got a call from Caleb, my youngest. He said, "Mom, I heard Aaron said you booked the hotel. What's it like?" I laughed. "Beautiful, son. Saltwater pool, live jazz by the beach, plenty of room for the kids to run." Caleb said, "Oh, and never mention money." I hesitated. "About the deposit, how are you planning to handle it?" Silence then. "I'm busy in a meeting, Mom. Later, okay?" I set the phone down. Numb. I tried to convince myself they really were busy, not avoiding me. But inside, a small crack opened. On December 30th, Aaron texted, "Mom, we're so excited. Paige is packed. The kids are counting days. Don't forget your medicine. Don't worry, everything will be wonderful." I read it and wanted to cry. Part of me still longed to believe my son truly wanted the best for me. His text was like a Band-Aid over that crack, but underneath, unease still bled. On New Year's Eve, I pulled my suitcase out, folded dresses neatly. The pale blue dress Thomas once said made me look 10 years younger, the hand-knit cardigan from my mother, the sandals that had traveled so many places with me. I even added my mother's old perfume, bottle, light, and breezy like ocean air. I wanted to show up not as some unwanted old woman, but as a woman with dignity. On January 2nd, Aaron drove up to pick me up. I stepped out with a bright smile, suitcase in hand, but as soon as I got in the car, I felt the difference. Paige sat in the passenger seat, eyes glued to her phone, muttering a quick hi without looking up. The kids in the back tapped on their games, not lifting their heads. Aaron asked a few polite questions, his tone distracted. I tried to chat, asked about work, school, but the answers were short. Paige even burst out laughing at a text, not bothering to explain. I asked, "What's so funny, Paige?" She replied curtly, Just friends, Mom, you wouldn't get it. I turned to the window, watching the trees slide past. My excitement dimmed, replaced by a familiar ache of being left out. The 3-hour drive felt heavy, but when the sea-bright palms came into view, my heart fluttered again. The white facade, green palms swaying, the fountain splashing high. I breathed deep, hoping the scenery would wash away my unease. We entered the lobby. I approached the desk proudly. I booked 5 suites under Evelyn Mercer. The receptionist smiled. Yes, all ready. Here are the room keys, all on the 3rd floor, ocean view. I turned to hand them out, but behind me, my children huddled, whispering. I caught Caleb mutter, 5 suites? A bit much. Aaron replied. Let Mom handle it, we'll figure it out later. I handed out the keys, hoping for a smile or a thank you. But they just took them, like it was nothing. Only Madison leaned close and whispered, Thank you, Grandma, I'm so excited. I squeezed her hand, warmed. As I stepped away, Aaron said, Mom, we'll head up first. You settle later. No one waited. No one asked if I needed help. I stood frozen, watching them disappear into the elevator, leaving me alone in the fancy lobby. Humiliation burned, my throat tight. I bit my lip until it bled, my hands shaking on the folder. For a moment I wanted to run to my room, to cry. But instead, I inhaled, lifted my chin. I remembered the addendum I'd had the hotel prepare, all expenses in my name, with full power to change. I slipped the folder into my bag, whispering to myself, No, Evelyn, don't cry. This isn't the end. It's only the beginning. That night, I sat by the window, looking at the moonlit sea. I thought of Thomas, of the ring I had sold. I whispered, I've done everything to hold this family. But if they don't see me as family, then they'll see I'm not their burden. In silence, I opened my notebook, wrote every line, deposit, balance, expenses, dates. Next to it, one small note, deposit money, deposit trust. I knew that trust was crumbling, and if it collapsed, I wouldn't collapse with it. I would stand. And this time, I would set the rules. The next morning, I woke early. Florida sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting pale stripes on the polished floor. The ocean hummed outside. I brewed coffee from the little machine, inhaled the smell, and steadied myself. Last night I had finished the ledger, deposit, debts, projected costs. This wasn't just a vacation, it was a test of kinship, bought with a wedding ring and months of sacrifice. Around 8 a.m., I heard kids' voices in the hall. I opened the door to see Madison knocking lightly, her face bright. Grandma, ready? Everyone's going to breakfast downstairs. I smiled. I'm ready, sweetheart. Let's go. We rode the elevator. The restaurant gleamed with sunlight, windows looking out on the pool. White-clothed tables held hot coffee and fresh orange juice. I spotted Aaron, Paige, Caleb, and Lila at a large table near the window, laughing, chatting. They barely noticed me approach. When Madison and I sat down, Paige glanced up, then went back to her phone. Aaron nodded politely. Oh, Mom, you came down. Sit. His words sounded more like formality than welcome. I sat down and quietly poured myself some coffee. No one asked if I'd slept well. No one mentioned what it had taken for me to prepare for this trip. Their silence wasn't random, it was deliberate indifference. Lila turned to Caleb, half whispering, half making sure I could hear. Yesterday at the spa, they mentioned a new treatment package this morning. We should book it before it fills up. Caleb nodded. Yeah, I'll call the front desk in a bit. As for the kids, there's a play area Grandma can watch them. The words shot straight into my ears. Grandma can watch them. I bit my lip and stirred my coffee in silence. It's not that I mind caring for my grandkids, I love them dearly, but the way Caleb said it, as if my only value was being a free babysitter, tightened my chest. I tried to chime in. If you all want to go to the spa, I could come too. Try a treatment. Paige gave a small laugh, her glance skimming me with a hint of mockery. Mom, those packages are a little modern, not really suited for older folks. Sitting beside me, Madison gently squeezed my hand under the table. I could feel her discomfort, as if she too sensed the unfairness, but didn't dare speak up. All through breakfast, the conversation circled around plans I was completely excluded from: spa schedules, water sports tours, a fancy dinner they'd already discussed. Now and then Aaron tossed me a perfunctory question to keep up appearances. I sat there listening to the distant surf and felt my heart icing over like a thin sheet of frost. When breakfast ended, everyone stood and left ahead of me without waiting. I dabbed the corner of my eye with the napkin and took a deep breath. I didn't want Madison to see me fragile. That noon, I returned to my room. Outside the window, the beach blazed with sun. Bright umbrellas crowded the sand, and children laughed as they built sandcastles. Looking down, I saw my own family playing together, not giving me a second thought. The sight twisted into me like a knife. I flipped open my laptop and pulled up the hotel confirmation email. Every document bore my name, Evelyn Mercer. I turned through each page of the contract, reading every clause carefully. I marked in red the line, "Sole account holder has authority to modify, cancel, or transfer." My chest loosened. I wasn't an invisible old mother. I had authority. I had proof. That afternoon, Madison knocked on my door, phone in hand. She looked at me and whispered, "Grandma, I think you should see this." On the screen was a WhatsApp group named No Drama Getaway. One line after another appeared. "Mom will cover everything, no need to discuss. Just let her think she's important. As long as she pays, we can enjoy ourselves." My vision blurred. Those words jabbed at every breath. I sat on the bed, my hands trembling. Madison gripped my hand tightly. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I didn't want to hurt you, but I think you have a right to know." I nodded, keeping my voice steady. "Thank you, Madison. At least I still have you." That evening, the whole family went out to dinner. I wasn't invited, and no one mentioned it. I stayed in, ordered room service, a salad, and a glass of red wine. When the server brought the tray, I sat on the balcony, watching the streetlights cast a warm glow on the damp sand. The ocean breeze threaded through my hair, briny and sharp. I sipped the wine, shame and resolve rising together. "Evelyn, no more tears," I told myself. "They see you as a burden, but they'll learn you're not a walking wallet. You still have strength. And this time you will use it." The next day, while the family headed to the pool, I walked alone to the front desk. The marble counter gleamed. Behind it, a young clerk smiled. "Good morning, Mrs. Mercer. How can I assist?" "You?" I set down my folder, speaking evenly. "I'd like to add a security note. From now on, any changes to the reservation require my physical presence and identification." She nodded. "Absolutely. We'll place that note in the system right away." I signed, my hand steadier than it had been in years. For the first time in a long time, betrayal didn't make me shake. I knew they were quietly plotting to edge me out, but I had started drawing my own lines of defense. That afternoon, when I returned to the pool, Paige beamed and lifted her phone to snap a group photo. I smiled from the side, not stepping into the frame. They probably thought I was silently enduring. They didn't know that every step I took was already calculated. Inside, I still heard the whisper repeating, "Mom is nothing but a burden." This time, instead of making me cry, it fueled my resolve. I didn't need their apologies right away. I didn't need their invitations or their forced kindness. I needed them to bear the consequences of what they were secretly doing, and I was ready. That night, back in the room, Madison sat beside me, eyes rimmed red. She held out her phone, her hands shaking as if she feared she was betraying her parents. I gently laid my hand over hers to calm her. "It's okay, sweetheart. If you think I should know, then let me carry this hurt. You just need to be honest with yourself." I took the phone and scrolled. The WhatsApp group No Drama Getaway was clear. Its icon, a colorful cocktail, Page's choice, probably. I read each line as if someone were pouring salt into an open wound. "Let Evelyn put it under her name, easier for us, we won't be tied to it. She'll pay up front. Don't worry. At the end, there'll be some issue, so we can avoid the bill. Split off and do our own thing. No hassle. She's old anyway, just let her stay in the room and watch TV. Reminder, don't let her know about this group. Keep flattering her. Easy enough." There were laughing emojis with tears and even a gif mocking me fussing with papers at the front desk. I stared, gripping the phone until my knuckles went white. Each word, each image stabbed straight into my heart. Madison murmured, "I tried to tell them it wasn't fair, that you'd already paid everything. They told me I'm too young, that I don't understand adult matters." I stayed quiet, a long pause, with only the sound of the surf outside the window. Finally, I nodded, my voice oddly calm. "You did the right thing. I know everything now, and I won't cry anymore. But promise me, keep this to yourself. Don't let them suspect." She nodded hard, tears spilling over. I wiped them away and held her close. I understood clearly. In that big family, only Madison truly stood by me. After Madison left, I sat alone and opened my accounting notebook. I wrote down what I had just seen, every sentence, every emoji. I stuck on a red sticky note labeled, "Evidence No." 1. Inside me, the pain hardened into a strange clarity. In the past, I avoided conflict, chose silence to keep the peace. But now, seeing the cold calculations of my son and daughter-in-law, I knew I could not keep yielding. That night, I still went down to the restaurant and sat through the family dinner as if I knew nothing. I smiled when Aaron raised a toast, when Paige ordered extra appetizers and left them half-eaten, when Caleb boasted about a snorkeling tour for tomorrow. I quietly ate spoonfuls of hot clam chowder to mask the chill inside. But my eyes recorded everything, the way Lila curled her lip at older ladies at the spa, the way Aaron glanced past me like I was a shadow, the way Paige stressed the word free when talking about the vacation. Every detail I filed away, like an accountant logging an unpaid debt. Back in my room, I screenshotted the entire chat on Madison's phone and saved it to the small USB drive I always carry. I knew this. In family battles, words can be denied, but evidence cannot. That night I sat by the window, staring at the black ocean. The moon was dim behind clouds, the wind snapping the curtains. I thought back over the years. The times I paid toward Aaron's house and he promised to pay me back over time. The times I gave Caleb money to start a business and got nothing but silence. I told myself it was a mother's duty, a way to keep my children close, but to them, I was only a walking wallet. Grief surged up, but right behind it came steel. I whispered, "No, Evelyn. Enough. Motherhood isn't for exploitation. If they see you as a burden, let them learn what it means to carry consequences." The next morning, I woke earlier than everyone. I called the bank and spoke with a risk department agent named Dana. I laid out the details. I was the only person paying for the entire vacation, but the family showed signs they might dispute charges after using the services. Dana listened patiently, then advised, "Mrs. Mercer, I'll flag your account. If a dispute is filed, we'll require the other party to prove their claim, and you already have documents and evidence. Please don't worry." I felt lighter, as if I'd built another layer of wall around myself. In the afternoon, I met the hotel manager, a Spanish gentleman named Victor Alvarez. I smiled, but my eyes were firm. "I'm the account holder for all rooms. I want it clearly noted in your system that no one but me may modify, cancel, or transfer." Victor nodded after reviewing my file. He signed a short addendum and stamped it with the hotel seal. I left his office with a lighter step. The pieces were clicking into place. On my way back, I saw the family at the pool. Paige, in a bright red bikini, laughed loudly. Aaron and Caleb held cocktails like VIP guests on a free vacation. I stood still, watching, and a complicated feeling rose in me, part pain, part disdain. That night, while the family went out again, Madison stayed with me. She showed more screenshots, including a message from Lila. "Remember to do the chargeback on the last day. Just say the services weren't as advertised. That way we don't pay a dime." I gave a cold smile. For the first time in months, my smile didn't tremble. I told Madison, "Sweetheart, let me handle it. They think I'm old, naive, easy to lead around. But they're about to learn I didn't do accounting all my life just to get duped now." I closed the phone, slipped the folder into my purse, and told myself, the game has flipped. And this time, I'm the one keeping the rules. The next evening, the family chose the hotel's Italian restaurant. I wore my pale blue dress, old but crisply pressed, and a light cream cardigan. In the mirror, I saw a tired face, but I forced a smile. I knew tonight would be a test of my endurance and of the backbone I was quietly putting in place. The restaurant glowed with warm lights, white tablecloths, and small vases of white roses on each table. The air carried the scent of baked pizza and red wine. I walked behind the group, slow and quiet, as if I were just an add-on to this vacation. We gathered around a long table. As soon as the server handed out menus, Caleb ordered a premium Italian red, a bottle I knew would cost at least $200. Paige hurried to add 2 appetizers just to taste. I waited my turn, then asked for a simple minestrone soup. I didn't want to be seen as indulging. While we waited, little Ben, Caleb's 8-year-old, turned to me, eyes shining. "Grandma, can you help me build a sandcastle tomorrow?" I laughed and patted his head. "Of course, honey, we'll build a big castle together." But Lila cut in right away, her voice tinged with disdain. "Ben, Grandma's older, she can't stay out in the sun all morning. Let your parents hire a coach for you." I froze at that. I looked at Ben and saw his eyes fall. I quickly added, gentle but firm, "It's okay. I can do it. You and I already made a promise, remember?" Ben smiled again, but I caught the annoyed glance from Lila and Paige. Dinner went on, everyone excitedly discussing tours, add-on services, and wine tastings. I stayed quiet, eating while I observed. I noticed how Aaron frowned when the server brought a preliminary check, then quickly slid it toward me as if it were automatically my responsibility. I nodded and took it, but a sharp pain pricked inside me. On the way out of the restaurant, Aaron suddenly held out his hand. "Mom, let me hold your papers and room keys so you don't have to carry everything." I stopped and smiled. "Did you forget? I've worked with paperwork my whole life. I only feel secure when I keep what's important." My tone was light, but my eyes told Aaron I wasn't giving in. As the group stepped into the elevator, I caught Paige curling her lip, whispering something into Lila's ear that made them both snicker. I turned away and kept silent. But inside, a small spark was catching fire. Back in my room, I sat at the desk and pulled out the file folder. I started reorganizing every receipt in chronological order: room deposit, dining costs, incidental charges. I used color sticky notes to sort them: yellow for restaurants, blue for activities, red for large items. I photographed each page with my phone and saved them in a dedicated folder. I wouldn't allow myself a single slip. A text from Madison came right then. "Grandma, the group chat is at it again. They're saying tomorrow they'll go to the front desk to switch the rooms into their names in case anything happens." I read it and felt my blood turn cold. I typed back to my granddaughter, "Keep taking screenshots for me. Don't let anyone suspect." Madison replied with a heart emoji. I sat still, staring at the black sea outside the window. I knew that if I did nothing, I'd lose everything, but I also knew that in this game, one wrong move and I'd be the senile old mother everyone laughed at. I couldn't let that happen. I grabbed my phone, opened my contacts, and stopped at the name Harold Benton, an old friend who used to be counsel for Thomas's construction company. I called. Harold's voice was old but steady. "Evelyn? How long has it been? What's going on?" I swallowed and gave him the short version. I had booked everything under my name, the secret group chat, messages plotting to dodge responsibility. Harold fell silent for a moment, then spoke firmly. "Evelyn, this is serious. It shows signs of financial abuse of an elder. I'll draft a sworn statement for you. Just sign and get it notarized. If things go south, we can take it to court." I closed my eyes, feeling like I'd just grabbed a lifeline. I whispered, "Thank you, Harold. I've been quiet too long. It's time I stood up." After the call, I felt my footing return. I was no longer just a mother trying to hold the family together. I was a woman who had to protect herself. I knew tonight's dinner was only the beginning. They were testing my patience and I was tempering my own counterplan. I gathered the folder, locked it carefully in my suitcase. I stood in front of the mirror and looked into my eyes. Wrinkles, crow's feet, silver hair, everything was right there, but so was something I'd lost for years, steel. I whispered to myself, "Evelyn, this road won't be easy, but you have nothing left to lose. They think you're a burden. Then show them how strong you are." Outside, the waves kept a steady beat, like music underscoring my resolve. That night I slept lightly, alert. I knew tomorrow the game would enter a new round, every action, and every word would have to be measured. And I was ready. The next morning, I woke very early. Dawn hadn't quite broken, but the waves were already murmuring beyond the glass, as if reminding me of the battle ahead. I sat at the desk, opened the folder, and reviewed every document again. Each receipt, each printout, every detail lined up neatly. I told myself, "Evelyn, there's no backing down today." I called the bank and reached the risk department. A young woman's voice came on. "Hello, this is Dana Whitaker. How can I help you, Mrs. Mercer?" Slowly, I explained from paying for the entire vacation to the secret family chat, plotting to duck responsibility. I stressed my fear that they'd try a chargeback after enjoying all the services. Dana didn't interrupt, just listened patiently. When I finished, she answered decisively. "Mrs. Mercer, you did the right thing saving all that evidence. I'll flag your account. If any disputes come in, we'll require the other party to provide strong proof, and you already have documents and screenshots. Keep everything organized, and we'll be on your side." I thanked her over and over. When I hung up, it felt like a heavy weight lifted off my shoulders. I'd built another wall to shield myself from their scheme. Right after that, I headed to the lobby to meet the hotel manager, Mr. Victor Alvarez. A middle-aged man in a neat gray suit, his gaze was firm but kind. I laid it out briefly. "Mr. Alvarez, I'm the only person listed and paying for all the rooms. I want to ensure that from now on, no one but me can modify or cancel them." Victor listened carefully, then nodded. "Do you have your documents?" I set the folder on the desk. He looked them over, then asked a staffer to bring in an addendum form. I read every line and saw my conditions spelled out. Only I could authorize changes. Anyone else would need my presence and ID. I signed. Victor stamped it and handed me a copy. "Mrs. Mercer, from now on our system locks all edits. Any changes require your confirmation. Please rest assured." I smiled, confidence rising. I wasn't just the dismissed old mother anymore. I was the legal owner of this entire vacation. Leaving his office, I walked across the gleaming marble corridor toward the pool. I saw my family lounging under the canopy, laughing loudly. Paige raised a pink cocktail. Caleb snapped a check-in photo. Aaron leaned toward Lila, saying something. They were all beaming, with no idea their little plan had just been blocked. I paused a few seconds, watching. A sorrow slid into me, the kind a mother feels when realizing how little her children value family. But alongside it came a cool determination. You can look down on me if you want, but I won't be fooled again. That afternoon, Harold called back. His voice was clear and firm. Evelyn, I've prepared the affidavit. Just sign and get it notarized, and I'll handle the rest. If this escalates, we'll have a legal file ready to protect you. I went to the hotel business center, met the notary, and signed right there. When the seal came down, it felt like I'd stamped a shield into place. That evening, the family gathered again at the Mexican restaurant on the property. I sat in the middle, listening to the chatter, but inside I was unusually calm. I knew I was a step ahead. During dinner, Aaron said suddenly, half joking, half serious, "Mom, tomorrow I'm thinking of asking the front desk if they can switch the rooms into my name so I can handle things. No need for you to fuss with all the details." I looked up and met his eyes. I smiled, but my voice was steady. "Son, everything's already clearly set. Only I can make changes. Don't worry about it anymore." Aaron flinched slightly. I saw Paige glance at him, then quickly change the subject to dessert. But in both their eyes, I caught irritation. They didn't know why yet, but they sensed their plan wasn't going smoothly. That night, back in my room, I opened the balcony and let the cool sea air drift in. Out on the water, little boat lights flickered. I knew I had locked the door they meant to slip through. I poured a cup of tea and wrote in my notebook, "Day 3 gate locked, evidence secured, bank alerted, manager signed, lawyer ready. Now we wait for their next move." I closed the notebook, feeling a rare calm. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting, I was prepared. Outside, the waves kept rolling, as if cheering me on. And inside, I heard the reminder, "Evelyn, you've built the wall, now let them run into it." The next morning, I put on a simple white blouse, tied my hair back, and took the folder to see Mr. Now. Victor Alvarez. We sat in his office, soft light coming through the glass. The faint smell of fresh coffee hung in the air. Victor placed a newly printed contract addendum with the hotel's red seal in front of me. He slid it over and explained, "Mrs. Mercer, per your request, we've updated the system. From now on, you alone have the right to cancel, lock, or transfer rooms. No one else, including family members, can interfere. You may also choose to lock any room keys at any time." I read each line, my heart beat slow but strong. Everything I needed was there. I had the right to retain or deactivate room keys. I had the right to cancel unused nights early. I had the right to request security support if there was disruptive behavior. I signed and carefully slipped the copy into a plastic sleeve. Victor smiled. "I trust you'll use this wisely." I nodded. "Thank you, Victor. I only want fairness. Nothing more, nothing less." Back in my room, I sat at the table and looked out at the glittering blue sea. A mix of sadness, grim satisfaction, and resolve rose in me. I knew this control was the key to turning the tables. I opened my phone and saw a new message from Madison with screenshots. "Clear as day. This morning after breakfast, let's go to the front desk and switch. The rooms should be easy," wrote Lila. "Yeah, Mom's old. She doesn't know these procedures," Paige added. There were a few laughing with tears. Emojis. I gave a cold smile. They had no idea that while they joked, every door they meant to open had already been locked and the key sat quietly in my hand. I texted Madison, "Don't worry, let them try. I want to see how they react." At noon, the whole family headed to the Italian place. I went along, calm as if nothing had happened. I noticed Aaron glancing around, clearly waiting for the moment to slip to the front desk. Sure enough, after the meal, He pretended to go to the restroom and veered off. I looked at Madison and gave a small nod. She understood and quietly followed. 10 minutes later, Madison returned, sat beside me, and whispered, "They're arguing at the front desk." The staff told them, "Only you can change the info." Paige's face is bright red, and Aaron is really irritated. I lifted my water glass, hiding a smile. Relief flooded my chest. For so many years, I had always been the one reacting, the one who had to accept. But now, they were the ones scrambling. In the afternoon, I decided to lightly tap my new authority. I went down to the desk and asked them to deactivate room key 901 for 2 hours for a system check. The front desk clerk noted it immediately and tapped a few keys. I stood there, calmly signed the confirmation, and watched. When I came back, the whole group was clustered in the hallway, fumbling with room keys that wouldn't work. Lila pounded on the door in anger. Paige was dialing non-stop. Aaron was breathing hard, trying to stay calm but clearly irritated. I walked by, feigning surprise. "What's going on, kids?" Paige glared. "Mom, the room's locked. We can't get in." I tilted my head, keeping my tone light. "Oh, really? Let me check with the front desk." Then I strolled on, leaving them there. Inside, I heard my own voice whisper, "This is only the warm-up." That evening, when everyone gathered in the lobby, I sat down on my own and opened my folder right in front of them. I didn't say a word, just calmly sorted papers, drew red lines, clipped them neatly. The table fell silent for a few seconds. Aaron finally spoke, forcing a casual tone. "Mom, do you really need to stress so much? It's a vacation, just enjoy it." I looked up and met his eyes. "I've stressed my whole life to raise you, and I will keep stressing, but this time, for myself." The table went dead quiet. No one said anything else. That night, Madison and I sat together on the balcony. She looked at me, eyes shining. "Grandma, I've never seen you this strong." I smiled and took her hand. "I've always had strength. I just hadn't used it before." We sat quietly, listening to the steady waves. In my heart, a plan was clearer than ever. They thought I was a blurry shadow in this family, but they would soon see the person steering this trip was me. I added to my notebook journal, Day 4 control addendum signed, test successful. "They're starting to panic. Madison is on my side. The game will hit its peak soon." I closed the notebook and lifted my eyes to the night sky. The thin moonlight washed over the sea, but inside me, the light was much stronger. I knew this battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. I had prepared for that morning days in advance. In my notebook, I had circled 10 in big red ink, a reminder to myself. That moment would be the turning point. Around 9 a.m., I got up early, brewed a black coffee, and sat on the balcony overlooking the pool. Down below, my family had already gathered. Paige was stretched out on a lounger, Lila was busy taking photos, and Aaron and Caleb were splashing around with the kids. I watched them all, my heart dipping, then surging with resolve. They thought I was invisible, but in just minutes everything would flip. At about 9:58 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Victor Alvarez, the hotel manager. "Mrs. Mercer, the system is ready. We'll deactivate the cards. Right at 10 a.m. I set the phone on the table and took a deep breath. The minute hand ticked forward. I could hear my heartbeat syncing with the waves. Then at exactly 10 a.m., everything unfolded like a scene cued by a director. At the pool, Paige stood up and tapped her room key at the glass door into the lobby. A beep sounded. The light flashed red. She tried again, same error tone. I watched her face shift from surprise to a scowl. Lila stepped up and tried her key. Nothing. Only that cold red light. Within minutes, the whole group was buzzing. Caleb frowned, and Aaron snapped, "Maybe the system's down." "Come on, let's go ask the front desk." I gave a thin smile, sipped my coffee, and kept observing from a distance. At exactly 10:15 a.m., my phone rang. Aaron. I waited a few seconds before answering. Mom, the room keys don't work. Come down and help us fix this now. I leaned back in my chair, voice steady. I'm busy, son. You can ask the front desk. I hung up before Aaron could say more. Around 10:45 a.m. Victor texted, I've explained it clearly. The cards were deactivated at the request of the booking holder. They seemed surprised. I read it with my heart pounding, but this time from a sharp, undeniable satisfaction. At exactly 10:58 a.m., Caleb called, his voice tight, straining for calm. Mom, did you cancel our rooms? I answered slowly. Yes. A dead silence came over the line. Then Caleb stammered, Why? I lifted my head, looked straight out at the blue sea, and said, Because I have the right. I set the phone down, oddly light. The hands that used to shake now calmly poured more coffee. I wasn't afraid anymore. At 11 a.m., Madison texted, Grandma, they're talking about coming up to your room. I smiled and arranged the folder I'd prepared. Contract, addendum, notarized statement, printed chat logs. I'd even printed 4 sets, one for each of them. I wanted a confrontation, I'd let the truth do the talking. Around 11:20 a.m., I heard urgent knocking. Aaron, Caleb, Paige, and Lila rushed in, faces twisted by anger, shame, and panic. Paige shouted, Mom, what did you do? How could you cancel our rooms? I didn't answer right away. I invited them to sit on the sofa and calmly slid a folder to each of them. On top were printed messages from their no-drama getaway group. They grabbed them and skimmed the lines. Free vacation. Have Mom pay first. Charge back at the end. The air in the room froze. Aaron stammered, This was just a joke. I held his gaze, my tone even and razor sharp. A joke? You call turning me into a wallet a joke? You thought I didn't know? I've known since day one. Caleb rubbed his forehead, trying to avoid my eyes. Paige and Lila glanced at each other, faces flushed. I placed my hand on the contract addendum and spoke clearly. You plan to make this trip free, but every room is in my name. I locked them. From now on, you're responsible for yourselves. Silence. Only the clock ticking, I continued. If you choose to shout, threaten, or insult, I'll call security. If you want to challenge the law, I'll present this notarized statement in court. But if you truly want to make it right, start by paying for your own vacation. I stood and stepped onto the balcony. The noon sun made the sea glitter, each wave slapping in agreement. Behind me, I heard Aaron sigh and Caleb mutter something to Paige. Without turning back, I said one last thing. I've lived my whole life preserving the peace. Today I live to preserve myself. I heard chairs scrape and heavy footsteps. Then the door closed. The room was quiet again. My hands trembled slightly, but my heart no longer felt heavy. Madison came in afterward, eyes bright. She hugged me tightly and whispered, You did it. I'm proud of you. I smiled and kissed her hair. We're only getting started, sweetheart. This game has many rounds. I looked at the clock. The minute hand had slid past the 12. A new chapter had opened, one where, for the first time in years, I wasn't reactive. I was in control. The next morning, Florida's sky was crystal clear, the early sun flashing across the rolling blue. I woke very early, sat at the wooden desk, and organized all the documents, printed messages, invoices, and contract addenda. I clipped each sheet into slim folders and stacked them neatly. I wanted everything crystal clear, because I knew what was coming. My family would come to confront me, and this time I wouldn't hide. Around 9 a.m., the phone rang. Victor, the hotel manager, said the small conference room on the ninth floor, room 903, was ready for the internal discussion I'd requested last night. I thanked him. Before hanging up, he added, "Mrs. Mercer, security will stand outside at a respectful distance. No one will intervene unless needed, but you can feel safe." I put on a modest navy dress, the one I'd planned for a family dinner they never invited me to. Instead of tears, I wanted them to see composure. I clasped a classic pearl necklace, picked up my briefcase, and walked out with Madison. She held my hand tight, her eyes bright with resolve. The ninth floor hallway was quiet. Room 903 stood slightly ajar. Inside, a long table, 8 chairs, a water carafe, and hot coffee were set out. I sat at the head, placed my folder in front of me, and Madison took the seat beside me. The door closed, and only the soft hum of the AC remained. I waited. 15 minutes later, quick footsteps pounded closer. The door flew open. Aaron came first, scowling. Caleb followed, eyes red from a sleepless night or anger. Paige and Lila pulled out chairs and sat, not bothering to hide their irritation. I greeted them quietly, but no one replied. The air was heavy as lead. I began, "You wanted to talk? This is the right time." Aaron slammed his hand on the table. "Mom, what was yesterday? Do you realize how embarrassed we were? People looked at us like scammers." I kept my voice even, not like, "You actually planned a scam." Caleb started to rise, but Paige tugged him back. I reached for the folder, flipped to a few printed chat pages, and slid them their way. Paper rustled. The black text was clear. "Free vacation, charge back at the end." Each line cut the air like a blade. Lila flushed and tried to deflect. "Mom, we were just joking." "You misunderstood." I looked straight at her, my voice dropping. "A joke? Then why did Caleb call the bank to start a dispute?" Madison heard everything. The room froze. Madison nodded, her gaze steady. Caleb choked on his words, mouth opening and closing with nothing to say. I went on, crisp as an indictment. "You invited me to put everything under my name. I sold my wedding ring and saved for 8 months to pay the deposit. You promised to split it, but in your private group you planned to cut me out, called me a burden, and intended to leave me with the bill when you walked away. Tell me, what have I done over all these years to deserve that?" No one answered. Only the clock hand moved. I opened another folder and pulled out the document I'd had notarized last night, a statement confirming I voluntarily paid all costs and that none of you has any right to dispute them. I set it down hard, and everyone flinched. "This is the evidence. The bank has noted it. The hotel system is updated. Even if you try to argue, the law will not be on your side." Paige burst into tears, but not from remorse. Her tears were just a thin shell hiding humiliation. Lila stared at the table, her hand shaking but clamped around her phone, hunting for an exit. Aaron made one last attempt. "Mom, we were wrong, but you have to understand times are tough. We just wanted to save money." I let out a faint laugh, but it tasted bitter. "Save money by cheapening your mother's trust? Do you have any idea what it took for me to put away every dollar? Were any of you there on the nights I shivered in a cold house because I turned off the heat to save a little, or watched me huddle over a thin bowl of soup just to scrape together a few more bucks?" Aaron said nothing. Madison squeezed my hand tighter, her eyes bright with anger. I stood, letting my gaze pass over each face. "Yesterday, when your keycards died, you panicked about losing a place to sleep. That feeling being left behind, treated like leftovers, I've tasted it for years. Today, you only got a small sample." The room went silent. Then I ended with a declaration. "From now on, I am nobody's wallet. You have 2 choices. Pay for your own rooms if you want to stay, or leave right now. Madison and I are staying to enjoy the vacation I paid for. Everything else is no longer my concern." No one argued. They knew every exit had closed. I gathered the papers and put them in my case. Before leaving, I paused, looked at their stunned faces, and quietly said, "You called this the no-drama getaway. You turned it into a tragedy. And I turned it into justice." I took Madison's hand and stepped into the sunlit hallway. Outside, security stood by and gave a small nod. I drew a long breath, feeling lighter. In my heart, I knew this hearing wasn't just a confrontation in room 903. It was a statement. From now on, I will not be dismissed. When the door to room 903 closed behind me, a quiet emptiness spread out. I held Madison's hand, feeling her pulse race. She said nothing, just walked beside me. The hallway blazed with sunlight from the window at the end, and that light made everything clearer than ever. I had taken a step I couldn't undo, and Madison had just become my only ally. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor, where there was a small, quiet lounge. I chose a table by the window and ordered 2 mint teas. Madison sat across from me, studying me for a long time as if trying to read what I hadn't said. Finally, she spoke. "Grandma, today, you felt like a completely different person. I've never seen you this strong." I gave a thin smile, my lips a little unsteady. "It's not that I changed, Madison. I just stopped enduring." She went quiet, tracing the handle of her teacup. I could tell she wanted to say more, so I waited. At last, she drew a breath. "I've known that secret for a long time, Grandma. They have a group chat. They added me to keep an eye on you. But the more I read, the more ashamed I felt. I was going to tell you, but I was scared." Her voice caught. I reached across and took her hand. "You were braver than anyone by choosing to stand with me. There's a line between them and me you've chosen. Don't blame yourself." Her eyes brimmed. "But they're my parents. I don't want to betray them, and I can't close my eyes either. When I saw you put down the evidence yesterday, I realized the truth matters more. You matter more." My throat tightened at that. For years I'd waited for recognition like this, not from my own children, but from a granddaughter who seemed small yet saw more clearly than anyone. I whispered, "Madison, you drew a line. They're on that side, you and I are on this side. That isn't division, it's protection. Sometimes, to preserve what's right, we have to stand opposite the people we love." She nodded, her gaze steadier. She told me that all last night, listening to her parents argue in their room, she decided she would not let them keep turning me into a faint shadow in my own life. In that moment, I saw how much she'd grown. She wasn't just a kid pulled into family conflict, she was a witness, an ally. The tea cooled, but our conversation didn't. I told Madison about my life, years of scrimping, simple dinners, so my children could have the best. I spoke about my late husband and the wedding ring I sold to put down the hotel deposit. Madison listened, her eyes shining with a kind of empathy no one else in the family had ever shown me. "Grandma, I promise I'll never forget what you've done, and I won't let anyone treat you like a burden again," she said, voice trembling but sure. I smiled, a calm rising in me. Near noon, my phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "Mom, we want to meet privately to work this out. Please don't take this further." I set the phone down without replying. Madison looked at me and asked softly, "What will you do?" I answered quietly, "I'll let them cross the line they drew. If they're truly sorry, they'll find a way to make things right. If not, we lose nothing." We decided to spend the rest of the morning on the beach. Madison ran barefoot on the sand, the wind lifting her long brown hair. I watched her, feeling suddenly lighter. It had been so many years since I'd smiled like that, not the forced kind hiding sadness, but a real one. On the beach, I told Madison a small story. When I was her age, I wanted to be an English teacher, but I dropped the dream to work and support my family. I said that if I regret anything, it's putting myself on the margins for too long. Madison hugged me and whispered, "You're not on the margins anymore, Grandma. You're at the center, at least for me." Those words meant more to me than any apology from my sons or daughters-in-law. By late afternoon, we went back to the room. On the table was a small note from the front desk. Caleb had left a message asking to meet that evening. I looked at Madison. She shrugged. "It's your call, but I'll be with you, no matter what." I slipped the note into my folder without answering. The line had been drawn. Betrayal on one side, honesty on the other. Madison had chosen to stand with me, and for the first time in my life, I knew I wasn't alone. That night, sitting on the balcony, I murmured to Madison, "You helped me see that justice sometimes begins with a young person's choice. You chose, and so did I. From now on, we go together." She smiled and rested her head on my shoulder. The surf pounded, the sea air tasted salty, and I realized strength doesn't always come from age or experience. Sometimes it comes from the courage to step across a line. Madison drew that line, and I'm ready to walk it with her, storms or not. That morning I woke earlier than usual. Seabright Palms was blazing with sun, the first rays slipping through the curtains and painting golden bands across the blue carpet. Madison was still asleep, her face peaceful, her brows twitching with a dream. I looked at her, full of feeling. I had found support, but I also knew I had to stand on my own. I opened my suitcase and folded my clothes neatly. For the first time in years, I packed without panic or fear. I wasn't running from anyone, wasn't rushing to dodge, yelling, or contempt. I was simply leaving because I wanted to. In the mirror, I saw an older woman with silver hair, wrinkles, and clear eyes. I told myself, "Evelyn, you're not fleeing. You're stepping out to own your life." Around 8 a.m., my phone pinged. A text from Caleb. "Mom, please don't go. We can talk again. Don't let the family fall apart." I read it and didn't respond. Late apologies, if they come at all, can't erase years of treating me like a burden. I wrote a few brief lines to leave behind for them. "I'm not running. I just won't accept being disrespected anymore. From now on, I'll take my own path. If you truly want to find me, do it with respect, not by using me." I set the note on the wooden table in room 903, where arguments had flown yesterday. It was a quiet, clear declaration, no more debate. As I rolled my suitcase out, Madison hurried over, hair tousled, sleep, still clinging to her eyes. "Grandma, you're really going?" I smiled and patted her head. "Yes, but not to run away, sweetheart. I'm just choosing a different direction." She pressed her lips together, then blurted, "I'm coming with you." We went down to the front desk together. Victor Alvarez was waiting. He handed me the final bill, everything in my name. When I signed the last line, my hand didn't shake like before. I felt it clearly. This wasn't just a payment, it was a signature of freedom. Victor looked at me, voice sincere. "Mrs. Mercer, I've seen many families and many stories. Few people walk away with your composure. I wish you the very best." I nodded with a small smile. "Thank you. At last I know how not to bow my head." We left the hotel. Outside, sunlight poured across the stone path. A taxi pulled up. The driver opened the door with a friendly smile. I set my suitcase in the trunk and turned for one last look. Seabright Palms sparkled in the morning light, but to me it was no longer a place of humiliation. It was where I took back control. Madison sat beside me in the car, her hand resting lightly on mine. She didn't speak, but I understood. We were moving forward without looking back. On the road, I watched the palms tilt their shadows across the shoulder. I remembered all the times I'd left houses and rooms with a bitter taste. I always thought I was running. Today I knew the difference. Leaving because you're forced is defeat. Leaving because you choose to is victory. I turned to Madison. "You know, I used to think my life would end quietly in endurance and compliance. But now I believe that even when we're older, we can still write a new chapter." Madison smiled, eyes shining. You're writing it now, and I'll read it with you. We reached a small nearby airport. I bought tickets to Boston, where I'd lived when I was young. I wanted to return to the little house in the suburbs, the one that once rang with laughter from me and my husband. I'd kept it, quietly paying taxes and upkeep. Never had that decision felt so right. While we waited to board, I wrote in my journal, Day 7, leaving Seabright Palms. No tears, no fear. I'm leaving, not running, taking the steps of someone who knows she deserves better. Madison is beside me. A new road is waiting. I closed the notebook and breathed deep. The PA announced our flight was ready for takeoff. On board, I took the window seat. As the plane lifted and the blue water shrank below, I felt a massive weight drop from my shoulders. I was no longer tied to a toxic cord. I'd cut it clean. Madison rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, Grandma, let's start over. I smiled and squeezed her small hand. Yes, starting today. The sky opened wide ahead of us, white clouds stretching like an endless carpet. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least I'd chosen to take it. And that choice, for me, was freedom. I left not to run away. I left to find myself. Our flight to Boston landed in the late afternoon. The air felt nothing like Florida. Colder, drier, but familiar in my memory. Stepping out of the airport, I took a long breath and felt the city that once held my youth. A taxi took us to the little house in Newton. I'd quietly kept all these years. A red brick place with a brown tiled roof and a few mossy streaks along the steps. I opened the door, the hinge sighed, and the warm smell of wood rolled out. Everything was still there. The oak set. My husband and I picked. Our wedding photo on the wall, the old clock ticking away. Madison walked in, eyes lighting up. It's beautiful, Grandma. I had no idea you kept everything. I smiled. This isn't just a house. It's where I dreamed, loved, and held on to hope. And now, it's where I'll begin again. That night, we sat in the living room, the fireplace washing the room in soft light. Madison leaned on my shoulder while I listened to the crackle of the wood. I realized happiness doesn't need luxury. Sometimes it's simply sitting in your own home beside someone who truly sees and loves you. The next day, I started cleaning, dusting the shelves, wiping the windows. Madison helped, quick hands and bright energy. Her laughter ran through the old house and brought it back to life. Watching her, my chest filled. I may have lost a lot in this life, but I kept what mattered most, the passing on of honesty and love. In the days that followed, I wrote everything that happened into a thick notebook. Not to complain, but to remember. I had been belittled and used, and I stood up, leaving with my head high. I believe one day Madison will read these pages and understand that courage sometimes arrives late, but never too late. On the weekend, we sat on the porch watching warm lights glow from the houses up and down the street. The night air was sharp, but my heart was warm. Madison asked softly, "Do you regret it?" I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. I didn't run. I left to keep my dignity. And that's something I hadn't done in years." I looked up at the starry sky and thought of my children. I don't know if they're sorry or if they understand, but that no longer defines me. I drew a line for myself, and I crossed it. I know some will call me selfish, say a mother should be endlessly forgiving, but forgiveness doesn't mean erasing yourself. Forgiveness has value only when it rests on respect. And when respect is gone, leaving is the last way to love yourself. Madison squeezed my hand and whispered, "Grandma, I believe things will be better from now on." I smiled, feeling lighter. Yes, from here on out we'll write a new chapter. No lies, no using people, only truth and love. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind through the trees. In that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. I left, but not in shame. I left as a woman who finally chose herself. And now, as I tell this story, I want to leave a note for anyone listening. We think it's too late to change, sometimes. But if you can still stand up and step forward, it is never too late. I, an older woman with silver hair, found freedom in what I thought were the last days of my life. If I can do it, anyone can. Thank you for staying with me to the very end of this story. Where are you listening from? What city do you call home? Please share in the comments. If this story touched you, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe so we can keep traveling together through the next chapters. Your support gives strength not only to me, but to anyone who needs the reminder that they deserve respect, love, and a life that belongs to them. Turn off the light. Noah won't be home tonight. I froze behind the half-closed door when I saw my son's fiancée standing between my husband's legs, his hands wrapped tightly around her waist. My throat closed up, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might tear through my chest. I stood still like a trespasser in my own home. Then I pulled out my phone and hit record. Just as I was about to burst in, I saw Noah, my son, standing at the end of the hallway, his face calm in a way that chilled me to the bone. He whispered, "Mom, I already know, and what I found out is far worse than anything you could imagine." If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Marion Whitaker, 66 years old, owner of the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn, a small inn tucked against a pine forest on the edge of Asheville, North Carolina. People say this place smells like cinnamon and pine every morning, warm like its name, Hearth. With these hands, I scrubbed the red bricks, hand-sewed every curtain, and hung deep red geranium baskets along the balcony. That morning, I woke while the fog was still low. The oven was just hot enough for a batch of buttermilk waffles, and the coffee dark roast from a small roastery on Haywood Street was dripping steadily into the pot. My routine rarely changes: proof the dough the night before, roll it out in the morning, and turn on the local radio about mountain weather. I've always believed small habits keep you steady. Life in your later years needs that kind of discipline. Gerald, my husband of 43 years, usually gets up early to help me set out trays and check the hot water lines. This morning he vanished, leaving a hurried note, down to the basement to check the pipes, heard a hiss. Don't worry. In a century-old house like this, hisses and little clicks in the pipes are normal. They're like the size of old wood. I didn't question it. I dusted sugar over the waffles, opened the kitchen window to let in the mountain mist, and glanced at the wall clock, 6:15 a.m. Tessa, my son, Noah's fiancée, said last night she'd sleep in the main house so she could try on her wedding dress with a local seamstress at the morning. She said the natural light in the living room is better than a studio. I agreed. Noah was staying at his apartment near the new brewery, convenient for work and to keep things traditional before the wedding. I had carefully pressed an ivory silk robe and had Tessa embroidered on the cuff as a welcome gift for my future daughter-in-law. The coffee was steaming, and guests in the first 3 rooms had requested breakfast at 7 a.m. I carried a fruit tray, planning to walk down the hall to the big fridge near the living room. And that's when a thread-thin whisper drifted out from the half-open door. Not the radio, not wood ticking, a voice soft, low, and intimate in the way I'd heard all my life with my husband. My hand paused on the knob, the other hand tugging at my apron. I didn't knock. A woman's intuition, or maybe basic self-preservation, kept me still. I leaned in. Just a narrow strip of light, but enough. Gerald sat on the edge of the living room settee, the blue shirt I had just ironed 2 days ago unbuttoned to the 3rd button. Tessa stood between his legs, hair loosely tied. The silk robe I'd given her, yes, that one parted just enough for Gerald's hand to rest on her waist. It was too clear to fool myself with any other words. I heard Tessa's breath-soft voice, "Turn off the lights. Noah won't be home tonight." Hearing my son's name in that scene hit me in the chest like a hammer. In one heartbeat, my whole life, 3 decades at the stove, our first winter after buying this place, the nights counting every saved dollar turned into the backdrop for a cruel joke. I didn't scream. I didn't shove the door. I didn't scratch or grab something to throw. I pulled out my phone, hit record, my palm cold like it had touched ice water. Partly instinct to preserve evidence, partly because I knew my shouting would only blow apart the hearth I had spent years tending. I backed away, placing each step like a thief in my own home, afraid even a small cough would shatter the mask being worn in there. As I turned, I saw a figure at the end of the hall, tall, lean, shoulders drooping like he'd been carrying something too heavy. Noah. My son's face was paper pale, but his eyes were strangely calm, the kind of calm you have after you walk through the storm first and come back to guide someone else. He didn't touch me, he just raised 2 fingers, a small shh gesture, and tilted his head toward the back door. I nodded, mouth dry, legs shaking so much I had to brace against the darkened timber wall. We passed the row of family photos, Christmas at the ski lot, Grandpa's birthday, Noah in his cap and gown moments that were once warm, now looked like shattered glass. The back porch met us with the smell of pine resin, birds in the woods, and the neighbor's mower far off. I gripped the wooden arm of the chair, waiting for my hands to stop shaking. "How long?" I asked, my voice so hoarse I barely recognized it. 3 months, Noah said, swallowing something like a stone stuck in his throat. He didn't look at me, he looked past my shoulder, to the blue-green ridges in the distance, like his next words needed the whole Blue Ridge to hold them up. "And there's worse." I waited. There are moments when you know you're standing at a cliff edge, and what you're about to hear decides whether you fall or fly. "I didn't want you to find out like this," Noah said, his calm voice running over a fierce current. "I tried to keep things steady for you. But—" He stopped, reached into his jacket, and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside were screenshots, emails, and a few powers of attorney signed Marion E. Whitaker, my name but not my hand, like someone had learned to write my name almost perfectly, except for one tiny mistake only I'd know, the one in Marion I always hook it, a habit from high anim school. On those papers it was a straight, nail-like line. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Gerald set up an LLC called Whitaker Hearth LLC 2 years ago," Noah said, voice flat like reading test results. "Then use those powers of attorney to transfer pieces of the inn's interests into it. Tessa, did you know she used to work for Summit Vista Holdings? They scoop up historic homes and turn them into boutique resorts." A dizzy wave made the scene tilt for a second. The wooden chairs, the wind chime, the freshly watered geraniums all snapped back into place. My trust didn't. "Why?" I asked the dumbest and truest question of my life. "For money?" Noah pressed his lips together. "To sell, Mom. To sell the Hearth Inn. Prices are up because of the new road. Summit Vista floated a strategic partnership. We keep a minority stake, they take operations, then in a few years they swallow it all." He exhaled. I ended it with Tessa in my head the moment I knew. "But I didn't want you shattered. I thought waiting until after the wedding would keep things quieter. Then I gathered proof, found an attorney. I wanted to protect you first." I looked at my hands. Knuckles thin, callous at the base of my thumb from years with a wooden spoon, sunspots from watering plants. These hands built a place called Hearth. I set them on the chair's arm, letting the cool wood pull me out of the shock. "What do we do?" I asked, then remembered this was only the start of the storm. "I've reached Avery Chen," Noah said, "an attorney who does real estate and signature fraud. We can meet today. But Mom—" He paused, and for the first time his steady eyes wavered. "Can you handle it? You'll have to act like you don't know bias time. You'll have to look at them and say nothing." I took a deep breath. The briny pine and coffee in my mouth held me steady. From the back porch I could see into the living room, where the first light painted a gold stripe across the patterned rug I found at a flea market 10 years ago. I heard cups clink on a tray, probably Gerald pouring coffee. I heard Tessa's small laugh, the one I used to think was a shy girl's. Every familiar sound warped like a dream heard through water. "I've kept this hearth burning for 40 years, I said, surprised my voice was as solid as the wood under my hand. "I can stand a few more days, to save it." I lifted my chin and met my son's eyes. "From now on, not one brick of the hearth ends up in their hands." Noah nodded, that calm settling back on him like a coat he puts on to shield me. "Then I'll call Avery. I'll get the files ready. And," he lowered his voice, "Mom, don't be alone with them unless you have to. I'll be around." I stood, smoothed my apron, and straightened my hair clip. I looked at my brown leather flats, worn at the outer heel habit of a kitchen worker who moves fast. "Let's go," I said. "Guests will be down for breakfast. The hearth still has to burn." I walked back in and opened the door wide like it had never been closed. The smell of coffee and buttered sugar greeted me like any morning. The only difference was my heart knew. And as I set the fruit platter on the counter and heard Gerald's steps on the stairs, I understood the last peaceful morning of my life had just ended quietly, like a flame shifting color before it flares. Noah didn't say anything else out on the porch. He motioned for me to follow, down the hall, and opened the small office at the end. I rarely went in there. Gerald used to say it was Noah's space for grad school papers. Later, my son kept the habit of locking the metal file cabinet and never letting me touch it. Today, that door opened, and I realized my child had been preparing something much bigger than I imagined. The room was dim bright with early sun through burlap curtains. Old wood and printer paper smell tightened my chest because I knew I was about to face the truth. Noah knelt and turned the dial on a black safe against the wall. Metal clicks echoed in the quiet, and my insides clenched. A few seconds later, the door swung open. Noah pulled out a thick, worn-edged envelope and set it in front of me, sliding it over like a ritual of handing over evidence. I dragged a wooden chair closer and, hands shaking, opened it. Out fell pages, message screenshots, credit card statements, printed emails. In a few photos I saw Gerald's number on the screen, with syrupy text to Tessa. "Miss you tonight. Room 307 is set." I read and felt my heart sink beat by beat. Those locations were all local hotels, places Gerald told me he had to stop by to meet a table linen supplier or look at lumber for repairs. Everyone lined up with times he was gone, leaving me alone with the hearth. "I found this 3 months ago," Noah said quietly, eyes on the desk, voice even like he was trying to keep me from collapsing. At first I thought it was dumb flirting, but when the hotel bookings matched Dad's trips, I couldn't deny it. I folded my fingers, nails biting my palms to stop the shaking. "Did you say anything to Tessa?" I tried to keep my voice steady, though my chest hurt. Noah nodded. I confronted her. At first she denied it, said I was paranoid. When I showed her the photos, she changed tone right away. She said, I didn't need to be miserable, that it could be a 3-way arrangement if I played along. He let out a harsh, metal-on-metal laugh. I walked out. From that day, I knew this wedding was a con. I opened my mouth, but my throat closed. In the stack, I suddenly saw a few legal authorizations. At the bottom, Marion E. Whitaker sat clear and bold. My hand jerked, my heart felt squeezed. The writing looked so real I touched it to be sure it wasn't mine, but I saw the tell. In Marion has always had a soft hook. Here it was a stiff, flat line. I looked up, gasping. They forged my signature. Noah nodded, anger flashing. I think Dad's been doing this for a while. He set up a company called Whitaker Hearth LLC 2 years back. Since then, he's been quietly shifting assets from the inn into it. using those forged authorizations to paper it over. My ears rang. The familiar wood walls felt like they were closing in. I whispered, "So, it's not just an affair?" "No, Mom," Noah said, voice hardening. "Tessa isn't the sweet girl you thought." Before coming to the U.S., she worked for Summit Vista Holdings, a company that scoops up heritage buildings and turns them into luxury resorts. To them, the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn is just a rare commodity. Prime location, historic architecture, values soaring. Tessa was sent here, and Dad went along. A cold line ran down my spine. In my head flickered the porch where I embroidered pillows, the stone steps Gerald and I chipped out years ago, the white rose garden I tend every spring. All of it bait for someone else to price, weigh, and sell off. I looked at my son. So, their plan? The wedding? Just to legitimize it? Noah gripped the desk edge, pain and anger lighting his eyes. Exactly. The ceremony is just theater. After the wedding, they'd have a legal path to control everything, then sell it all. And after that, he paused, lips tight. They'd disappear, Mom. Disappear with everything we spent a lifetime building. I couldn't say another word. In that moment, I knew the thin piece I'd clung to for decades had cracked for good. Every memory, every drop of sweat, every year Gerald and I stacked to build this home was being haggled over on a stranger's table. I put my hands on the stack of papers and looked straight at Noah. Well then, son, if they've scripted our lives, it's our turn to rewrite the ending. I bent down, hands trembling slightly as I turned each page in the file Noah had prepared. On the cover, the bold line read, "Strategic Partnership Proposal." It sounded flashy, but a few lines in and I knew this wasn't partnership, it was a disguised takeover. People say dry documents never lie, and when they're right in front of you, they feel like an indictment. They planned to turn my home, the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn, into a premium travel product, a cold phrase with no heart in it. I thought about the last few years, how the land around Asheville heated up day by day. The new road made it easier for tourists from Atlanta and Charlotte to get here, and bit by bit the area became a favorite for deep-pocketed buyers, snapping up old houses and small hotels to flip into resorts. I used to be proud that our little Hearth Inn kept its original warmth, so different from the glossy hotels springing up nearby. Now it turns out that very authenticity made it a rare commodity. They looked and saw profit. I looked and saw a lifetime of memories. Gerald's words echoed in my head those times he sat on the porch with a beer and blurted, "Wish we could just sell it all. Head to Florida, buy a house on the beach. No worries, just sun and waves." I laughed back then, thinking he was joking, because for 40 years he seemed tied to these mountains. Turns out it wasn't idle talk. It was a real dream, and Tessa turned it into a lever. My throat went dry as I wondered when the man I trusted became someone who could betray so easily. Noah sat across from me, eyes sad but steady. He started from the beginning, wanting me to see it clearly. Tessa didn't just happen into his life. In the culinary class at Biltmore, she approached him first, made friends first, and slowly slid into every corner of Noah's life. "Do you remember the first time I brought Tessa home?" She went on about loving old houses and family dinners by the fire, Noah asked. And I remembered. I'd been happy then, thinking my son had found a soulful girl who valued tradition. Now I know those were rehearsed lines meant to soften me up. The more I listened, the clearer it felt like a pre-written play. Love at first glance in class, a quick engagement, then Gerald and Tessa handling paperwork, and finally selling Hearth Inn to Summit Vista Holdings. Each step locked into the next with a cold precision. A shiver ran through me. What was my role? The gentle, blind mother who'd nod on the wedding day, smile for photos, then get quietly pushed out of the home she built. It was all scripted, just waiting for me to hit my marks. Noah lowered his head, voice tight but firm. I decided a while ago I'm not marrying Tessa. I didn't say it yet because I wanted you safe first. If I broke it off suddenly, she and Dad would know something's up and might do something reckless. I looked at my son and saw both the child I once lulled to sleep by the fire and the man ready to carry the weight to protect his mother. My nose stung. I set my hand on the table and drew a deep breath. Noah, I won't let anyone take even a single brick from Hearth Inn. This is our home, our blood, our tears, all the years we've poured into it. If they want to steal it, they'll have to get through me first. The words came out like a vow. I never imagined I'd face my husband and future daughter-in-law as enemies, but I'd never felt a fire this strong inside me either. We sat for hours in that small office, the wall clock ticking between each sentence. In the end, we made a decision: find an independent attorney with no ties to Gerald or anyone around here. And do it quietly, step by solid step, without tipping our hand. One small mistake and they'd get suspicious and speed things up. I pulled an old notebook from the drawer. From that day, I started logging everything. Dates, times, the tiniest details when Gerald was gone, who Tessa called, things they said when they thought I couldn't hear. I wrote like a witness in my own home, building a file no one could deny. My pen sometimes shook, but line by line the writing sharpened, like carving into stone. Every time I closed the notebook, I looked around the room. The hand-built shelves, the fireplace where generations of guests had gathered, the windows opening onto the garden I've tended plant by plant, all of it seemed to whisper, "Don't let us disappear." And I promised myself, Noah, and our family's past, this is a fight I am not allowed to lose. We met attorney Avery Chen in a small office downtown, on the second floor of a red brick building more than half a century old. Sunlight poured through a big window, but inside it was calm and almost solemn, just the sound of pages turning and a pen sliding over old wood. Avery, an Asian American man in his 40s, had sharp eyes and a steady voice. I'd heard he specialized in real estate and signature fraud. That's why Noah had booked him. He listened without interruption, nodding or jotting notes now and then. He examined every document from Noah, lingering long over the signatures with my name. When everything lay in a neat stack, he looked up at me and said firmly, "Mrs. Whitaker, this shows clear signs of forgery, fraud, and unlawful asset transfer. This isn't just a family dispute. It's criminal behavior." The words cut like a blade, painful but also a relief. Finally, someone saw and named what Gerald and Tessa were doing. I didn't have to doubt myself anymore. Avery continued, "The best plan now is to file a civil action at the county court and request an emergency order to freeze all transactions tied to the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn. If granted, no one can transfer, sell, or mortgage the property until the court rules." Noah exhaled, and my heart pounded. I asked, "How soon would that order take effect?" Avery said, "If we prep the evidence, a few days. Meanwhile, I'll notify local banks and the county recorder to flag any suspicious activity. That way we lock the front door and bolt the side ones." I clenched both hands in my lap. Gerald wouldn't take it well if all his exits got sealed. As if reading my mind, Avery leaned in, voice slow but serious. "You should be prepared. When people sense their plan is threatened, they may try to wipe evidence, burn documents, destroy contracts, or move money fast. It's common in cases like this." A chill ran down my spine. For years I believed we had nothing to hide, and this house was the safest place on earth. Now I had to consider my husband might turn into the one to destroy it all with fire or worse. I glanced at Noah and saw his brow pinched with worry. I drew a long breath and said clearly, "If we want to protect Hearth Inn, we have to act normal. I'll keep cooking breakfast, greeting guests, smiling like always. The more they believe I don't know, the more time we get." Noah turned to me, voice nearly breaking. "Are you sure you can handle that?" "Seeing them every day, pretending in front of the man who betrayed you, I'm afraid it'll wear you down." I took my work-roughened hand and set it over his, strong but tired. Noah, I whispered. I built this place with these hands. The walls, the bricks, the boards, my sweat is in them. If I have to pretend a few more days to save it, I can. This isn't the first time I've been patient to protect our family. Pride and hurt flashed in Noah's eyes. He nodded, then looked at Avery. Only the three of us know everything. No one else. We want to keep the circle tight. Avery nodded. Good. The fewer who know, the safer. I'll handle all filings myself. In parallel, I'll contact Lieutenant Mateo Ramirez at the police department. When the threshold is met, they'll open a formal criminal investigation. For now, we keep it quiet. Hearing Ramirez's name reminded me of Tandid. Seeing him at community events, a tall Mexican-American man with a steady, serious gaze. I'd heard he was relentless in property fraud cases. Knowing he'd be in charge made me feel like the law was a shield at my back. We wrapped after more than 2 hours. When we stepped out of Avery's office, Asheville's sky had turned gray, heavy clouds signaling a hard rain. I pulled up my scarf and looked toward the mountains, a strange surge of resolve rising in me. For the first time since I discovered the betrayal, I didn't feel like an abandoned wife or a dismissed mother. I felt like the owner of Hearth Inn and I would fight to keep it. Noah drove home in silence. Only when the inn's familiar roofs came into view did I say softly, "From now on, we're in a big play. Remember, every look, every gesture can be scrutinized. The better we perform, the closer we get to winning." Noah tightened his grip on the wheel, tense but resolute. "You won't be acting alone. I'm here." I looked out the window at the garden I've tended for decades. Beds, trees, grass, everything stood quiet, witnesses to what I was about to defend. A silent vow rose in me. No matter who they are or how slick their plan is, I won't let a single brick of the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn slip from my hands. The next morning I went to the kitchen earlier than usual. The batter I'd mixed the night before just needed the oven's heat to fill the house with that warm scent. I set the table, making each move slow and natural. When Tessa came in, hair a little tousled, I smiled as if I knew nothing. "What bouquet are you thinking for the ceremony? I think peonies would suit you," I said evenly. Tessa flinched for half a second, eyes wide, then snapped back to her cheerful self. She smiled sweetly and started debating between white roses and orchids. I nodded along, pouring milk like a model mother-in-law. Inside, every word felt like a blade. Gerald walked in with his coffee. He made it his old way, extra grounds. Hardly any sugar, filling the kitchen with a bitter, harsh aroma. I watched him stir slowly, eyes dodging mine. I know his tiny habits better than anyone, and that fake, calm routine only made his anxiety show more. I pushed a little further. "While plating pastries," I said casually, "I should probably call the church and postpone the ceremony a bit. My aunt in Boston is in the hospital, and you know she treats Noah like her own. It would be awful if she couldn't be there." Tessa froze for exactly half a second, eyes wide, then nodded quickly. "Oh, I completely understand. Family comes first. We can push it a few weeks, it's fine." Her words were soft, but I saw her fingers clamp the napkin harder than usual. Gerald looked up, flicked a glance toward Noah, like he was testing for a crack. My son kept a calm face, took a bite of pastry, then shifted the topic to new breakfast options for guests. The whole table sat in a silent play, everyone understood. That afternoon, after the guests left to explore, I sat quietly in the office with a thick stack of forms. I started the application to designate the Blue Ridge Hearth Inn as a local historic property. Those dry lines about cultural value and distinctive architecture became the steel deadbolts I set on my home. If approved, any sweeping renovations or demolition plans would be stopped by law. Each sentence I wrote felt like another lock, another shield for the place that's held my life. When I signed my name, my hand was steady in a way it hadn't been for days. Marion E. Whitaker came out clear, no shake, no tilt. For the first time in days, I felt a piece of control return to me. Night fell with a light mist outside. I kept the reading room lamp on, pretending to review bookings. Then a strange whisper pulled me from the desk. I stepped softly onto the back porch, heart pounding. Tessa's voice, low and firm, cut through the dark. "We need to speed it up. The buyer's getting impatient. They want to close soon." That line, "we need to speed it up, the buyer's getting impatient," might sound like business, but in this house it was a knife in a mother's heart. What do you think when greed makes people treat family like merchandise? Leave your thoughts, sometimes. An honest comment is the best comfort for anyone who's been betrayed. I couldn't see who she was talking to, only Tessa's slim frame under the dim yellow light. I stepped back, silent. My heart hammered, but my mind was bright as a lamp. Back in the room, I opened my notebook and wrote down the time, the place, every word Tessa said. Then I snapped a photo and sent it to Avery through an encrypted app. Every line, every bit of data felt like a heavy stone I was adding to the scales of justice. That night, I lay beside Gerald, listening to his steady breathing. Outside, the mountain wind hissed through the window seams with a chill. I stared at the ceiling, feeling tension wrap around me like fog, but instead of fear, I felt a growing resolve. I knew the fight would be long, but step by step, piece by piece, Noah and I would build a wall they couldn't climb to steal our home. Tuesday morning, just after I finished breakfast for a group from Atlanta, a strange black SUV pulled up at the gate. Two men in suits stepped out with briefcases, their faces so confident they bordered on arrogant. I glanced at Gerald. He flinched, then quickly put on a calm face. Tessa stepped off the porch, voice sweet as honey. Right on time. They introduced themselves as representatives of Summit Vista Holdings, the company I'd already heard about from Avery and Noah. One, Barrow, had salt and pepper hair and a practical smile. The other, younger, with a sharp, cold gaze, was named Mendez. They talked about a strategic partnership opportunity, about keeping your family a minority stake for appearances. Each word hit like cold drops of water. It was clear Summit Vista saw Hearth Inn as a parcel to extract value from, and we were just obstacles to clear. I invited them to walk the rose garden out back. The blooms were open, the scent mild in the mountain air. I kept my voice even, telling the story of each stone in the path, even the foundation stone Gerald and I set ourselves in the summer of 1982. I hit every word like a reminder. This place isn't a commodity, it's part of my family's body. Back at the front porch, I stopped, turned to the two men, and said lightly but firmly, "My home is not for sale." It wasn't loud, but in the quiet it rang like a bell. Gerald, beside me, slid his gaze away and suddenly got busy adjusting his cuff. Tessa laughed and tried a joke. "Oh, Mom just talks tough. We all want what's best for the inn." But Noah stepped forward, standing behind me like a steady shadow. His eyes locked on Barrow and Mendez without a flicker. Barrow set his briefcase on the porch table and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "We understand the emotional attachment, but please take a look. This is just a draft MOU, a memorandum of understanding. You and your family will keep your name on the sign, but the management terms will transfer to us. That's how Hearth Inn can grow." I took the stack, flipped a few pages, and saw the cold phrases clearly. Transfer of operating control, full financial authorization. I set the papers down, looked straight at Gerald, and asked one question. "Who currently has signing authority?" The whole porch fell silent. Gerald froze, his eyes darting like he was searching for an exit. His lips moved, but nothing came out. Tessa shot him a look, clearly waiting for him to speak. But Noah answered firmly instead, calm but ringing clear. "The legal owners and signatories are Marion Whitaker and Noah Whitaker." He said each word precisely, as if drawing a line that could not be crossed. The air seemed to harden. Mendez gave a small cough. Barrow awkwardly closed the file. They looked at each other, then at Gerald, hoping for a different response. Nothing but silence. Finally, Barrow forced a smile and said, "We understand perhaps this isn't the right time. We'll be in touch." They pulled back, obviously flustered. The SUV engine roared to life and rolled slowly down the dirt road. I stood there watching, saying nothing. Beside me, Noah stood straight, like a soldier who'd just won a small battle. Tessa was different. Her face was tight, one corner of her mouth curled up, but her eyes were on fire. As soon as they left, she yanked out her phone, thumbs flying at a frantic speed. I knew those messages weren't about coffee dates. Gerald came closer, trying to play it cool. "It's just negotiation, Marion. People always push for more, but it doesn't mean we're agreeing to anything." I looked at him without replying, and I could see the strain under the mask. That night, I sat alone in the office, the desk lamp shining on a notebook already thick with pages of notes. I wrote down the time, detailed the meeting, the looks, the gestures, and especially Gerald and Tessa's reactions. Then I sent an encrypted report to Avery. When I hit send, my heart felt heavy but steady. I knew after failing at my doorstep, they wouldn't take the straightforward route again. Tessa's whisper from the porch the night before kept echoing, "Speed it up, the buyer's getting impatient." I understood the next step would be the shortcut, and that meant this fight was about to get harsher than ever. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. Avery Chen's name lit the screen. I stepped onto the back porch where the breeze moved through the rose bushes and answered. His voice was calm but urgent. "Mrs. Whitaker, the court granted the emergency order. From now on, all transactions involving Blue Ridge Hearth Inn are frozen. No bank or title office will process a transfer until the case is heard." I closed my eyes and felt like an invisible shield had just risen around the house, but Avery didn't let me relax long. It also means they'll try something else. I forwarded the full file to Lieutenant Ramirez. He'll run discreet surveillance around the property to catch any moves. That night, after Noah fell asleep, I went back through my notes alone. Blue ink lines stacked with dates, times, each slip of Tessa's tongue every time Gerald disappeared. Suddenly, a new notification popped up in the secure inbox I shared with Avery. A bank statement. Withdrawals from the Whitaker Hearth LLC account the shell Gerald set up 2 years ago were being routed through a middle wallet and scattered to multiple places. I watched thousands of dollars vanish with each transaction. My hands shook, but my eyes sharpened. This wasn't personal anymore. It was proof of active laundering, clear and undeniable. The next morning, I ran into Tessa in the lobby. She was labeling 2 shiny, fancy new suitcases. When she saw me, she smiled sweetly. "I bought these for the honeymoon, but I'll probably use them for a work trip first." I just nodded, holding back questions. I was used to her double-meaning lines. That afternoon, Gerald walked into the kitchen while I was washing vegetables. He hesitated, then smiled, trying to sound casual. "Marion, it's been a while since we had a dinner out. How about tonight? Just us, like before." I turned and saw something odd in his eyes, part probing, part pleading, and part hiding. I nodded, my voice light as air. "All right." Inside, I knew. My performance was beginning. Near dusk, I went to change. I chose the dark blue dress Gerald once praised at an anniversary party, the color hugging my figure just enough the image of the wife he used to be proud to hold hands with. In the mirror, my eyes weren't the same anymore. Hurt, but also resolute, I whispered, "End it tonight, Marion. This is the last round." The plan with Noah was set. I'd leave with Gerald for dinner. But first I'd forget my purse on the table. When I went back to get it, I'd tip off Noah. He would hide in the office and turn on the new covert cameras. If Gerald and Tessa thought we were gone and rushed to haul documents, move the safe, or grab jewelry, every move would be recorded. Caught in the act, evidence stronger than any statement. I stepped into the hall and heard Noah's steps upstairs. He looked at me, worry in his eyes but steel in his stance. I leaned in and murmured, "I'm not afraid, son. We finish this." He squeezed my hand hard, then disappeared into the dark office. Before leaving, I peeked through the window. Tessa sat on the porch, texting nonstop. Her blonde hair fell forward, her face tilted down, but I knew she was talking to someone about timelines. I turned away, keeping my face calm. As Gerald drove off the lane onto the main road, I leaned back, eyes forward. Heavy dark clouds stacked over the blue ridge like slabs of lead. Cold air slid through the window crack, carrying a raw dampness. A storm was coming. I had one inside me too, but it wasn't fear. It was the storm of waiting. Tonight, every mask would fall. And my house, the one I built with my whole life, would be defended by truth laid bare. La Montagne sat on a quiet street a few miles from the inn. Candlelight flickered across the table, catching the crystal glasses and warming the white linen. Gerald sat across from me, suit neat, wine-colored tie. He tried to be gallant, poured the wine, and raised his glass. "Marion, you're as beautiful as ever. I'm lucky to have a wife like you." I lifted my glass, offered a small smile, but my eyes didn't waver. I set it down, leaned in, and kept my voice low, just for us. "I know everything. The flight to Miami connecting to the Bahamas, and the shell account. Under that LLC." Gerald went still. In the candlelight, his face drained white, eyes wide like someone had ripped off a familiar mask. His hand shook around the glass. "Marion, you're misunderstanding. I'll give you a fair share. We can split it. I wasn't going to leave you." I sat straight and answered evenly. "Gerald, I'm not asking for a share of a house I built with my own hands. Blue Ridge Hearth Inn isn't yours alone, and it's not a bargaining chip." My voice was firm, each word landing like a hammer on wood. The air thickened. Gerald inhaled, eyes flashing, then ducked behind a forced smile. "You don't understand. This is an opportunity. We'll be richer than ever." His line cut off when my phone buzzed in my pocket. "Noah," I answered. His voice was a tight whisper. "Mom, they're gathering files and jewelry. Avery called the police. Ramirez and the team will be there in a few minutes." I pushed back my chair. It scraped loud against the floor. Gerald panicked. "Where are you going?" I looked him in the eye. "I have to go home." He reached out, frantic. "Marion, wait. No need to blow this up. Sit down and let me explain." I brushed his hand aside and headed for the door. I knew the thing Gerald feared most wasn't losing assets, it was me seeing, with my own eyes, what was happening in my house. We got in the car. Gerald gripped the wheel, his hands white-knuckled, veins raised. He stomped the gas. The car shot along the mountain road. Wind whistled through the crack, hot asphalt smell rising thick. I stared out the window as trees blurred backward, the rare streetlight flaring and vanishing like a slow-motion reel. I wondered how many homes across this country hold secrets no one dares say out loud. How many wives, how many mothers have sat in a car like me, knowing the betrayal, staying steady while waiting for the truth to surface. Gerald drove faster, sweat beading on his forehead. I could see panic swallowing him. He knew tonight was the turn his game had spun out of control. He exhaled and almost begged, "Marion, I just wanted a new start. You have to believe me." I didn't answer. I stared straight ahead, and then as we turned into the inn's entrance, red and blue lights flashed across the front lot. Patrol cars were already there, lights strobing over brick and wooden fence. In that moment, I knew. Everything Noah and I had prepared for was bearing fruit. The truth was about to hit the table like face-up cards. And Gerald, the man who once laid the inn's bricks with me, would have to face it. No way out. The car shot through the last curve back to the inn, and the red and blue had already washed the whole yard. The flashing lights stuttered across the wood siding, the house walls, the tall pines, and the stone plaque where Gerald and I carved our names over 40 years ago. Mountain wind carried heavy damp and a distant growl of thunder. The porch I knew so well now looked like a stage where the final act was dropping. I gripped my bag strap, stepped out, and the wind whipped my dress around my legs. Wet earth, pine resin, and the metallic smell of police cars mixed into the thick scent of endings. Right on the steps, Tessa was in cuffs. Her pale wrists jerked against bright metal, shoulders shaking. She shrieked, voice sharp, "You've got it wrong, I didn't do anything, I just—" A clean, cold click of a weapon behind her cut the line short. Tessa's eyes darted wild. On the porch floor, her fancy leather suitcase lay open. My jewelry pouch, neatly folded documents, and a silver USB stick catching flashlight beams. Next to her, two unfamiliar men were pinned over their SUV's hood. One, bald with a faded tattoo, growled, "I'm just the guy they hired to haul stuff." The other, hair slicked with sweat, couldn't speak. His face was a blur of fear and defeat. Lieutenant Mateo Ramirez stood square on the porch, tall and broad-shouldered, uniform damp with rain. His voice carried through the storm, clipped and clear. "You are under arrest for possession of stolen property and conspiracy to defraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court," he signaled, and a young officer in white gloves held up a sealed leather pouch. I recognized it instantly, my chest clenched. Inside, the emerald earrings my mother gave me when I turned 21, the pearl necklace Gerald bought in New York for our 20th anniversary, and the diamond ring I'd kept in the safe since the day Noah was born. Now they were evidence pieces of my life taken and returned in shame. Ramirez lifted another envelope and opened it for me to see. Inside were the USB and copies of transfer papers. "We recovered the code you sent," he said. "These are the forged signatures, the management transfer contracts, and the money moved from the LLC account to a middle wallet. There's no denying it." I looked to Noah. He stood under the porch, hair wet with rain, jacket dusty with wood flecks. His eyes shone in that chaos, relieved and hurting at once. When I stepped over, he wrapped an arm around my shoulders and whispered, "You're here. Everything happened exactly like you said. The police got here in time." I nodded, my throat tight. All the fear, the anger, and the hope I'd held for months broke open, but not the way I'd imagined. No screaming, no tears. Only a deep quiet like a lake after a storm, when everything sinks to the bottom. Behind us, Gerald stepped out of the porch shadows. Red and blue strobes washed his face bone pale. He moved slowly, eyes searching, then stopped in front of me. His voice cracked. "Marion, you have to hear me out. This is all a misunderstanding. I wasn't trying to hurt you." I looked at him for a long time. So many years breakfasts with laughter, Christmas lights, nights by the fire, listening to rain. Now all I saw was a small, shaking stranger. I spoke softly, each word heavy as stone. "This is my house. No one has the right to take it, least of all the person who built it with me." Ramirez stepped forward and motioned to two officers. He said simply, "Arrest the suspect, Gerald Whitaker, as an accomplice in property fraud." Gerald's hands were pulled behind him. The clink of handcuffs rang bright in the night. He lifted his head, eyes locked on me, no trace of the old confidence, only a flash of fear and too late regret. "Marion," his voice broke, "I never wanted it to end like this." I didn't answer. Words meant nothing now. Some betrayals can't be patched with apologies. I watched as they led him to the car, and the metal door slammed, one hard thud sealing a life we'd shared that had rotted long ago. As the car rolled out of the yard, I stood under the pine porch. Rain thickened, hitting the roof, the steps, and my shoulders. I didn't wipe it away. The cold drops felt like a final washing, rinsing off the grime of the years I'd been deceived. Noah came close and set his jacket over my shoulders. I felt my son's warmth, The resolve in the way he stood beside me, not the child who once feared thunder, but the man who had walked with me through the biggest fight of our lives. I squeezed his hand and whispered, "It's over now, Noah." He nodded, eyes fixed on the pines. The tall trunks stood firm in the rain, branches swaying in the wind, their rustling steady like a farewell song for a marriage that had just ended. In that moment, I felt they were speaking for me. It was time to close the door. Lieutenant Ramirez turned back, his voice low but kind. "Mrs. Whitaker, I'll be honest, very few people stay as composed as you did. In most cases, folks either fall apart or let their emotions wreck the plan. You saved yourself and your property." I gave a small smile, my breath fading into the damp air. "I only did what I had to do to protect this house," I said. "My house and my son's." Ramirez nodded, gave me a brief farewell, and walked off, his shoes printing the wet ground. The police cars left one by one, until only the porch light's pale glow and the steady rain remained. I stood there a long time, looking at my house in the dark. The wooden frames, the steps, the old roof, everything was still there, still solid, like my own heart after all the storms. I realized I didn't need to collapse to be pitied. Sometimes silence and resolve are the only answers a betrayer deserves. A final gust blew through, carrying the warm resin scent of pine, like the old season saying goodbye. I lifted my head, drew a deep breath, then gently closed the porch door, my chest lighter than it had been in years. The next morning, Asheville seemed to wake up to my news. The Asheville Daily Chronicle ran a bold headline, "The Blue Ridge Hearth Case, a shock in the heart of a historic town." Just below was the familiar photo, the front of my house in stormlight and police flashers. A small caption read, "A small but complex property fraud investigation tangled with family, corporate ties, and trust." I sat in the living room, coffee cooling in my hand. Noah set the paper on the table and said carefully, "Did you ever think you'd be on the front page, Mom?" I shook my head with a tired smile. "No, but at least the truth has a name." In the weeks that followed, the truth peeled back in layers. Piece by piece, the picture came into the light. Police released preliminary findings. Tessa Miller, her real name, had been a mid-level employee at Summit Vista Holdings, tasked with scouting and persuading owners of promising properties. In old files, there was even a photo of her at a project launch in Denver, beaming as she shook hands with one of the company's vice presidents. The two men arrested that night confessed as well. They'd been hired to clear out documents and jewelry for a few $1,000s in cash. "We just did what we were told," one statement read. "We heard the place was about to be handed over to a new owner, so it had to be cleared fast." I reread that line in the report, my hand tightening. Handed over to a new owner. They said it like an auction lot, not the home I'd built with my youth. Gerald was held for a few days, then released on bond awaiting trial. On the first court day, he walked in with his head down, gaunt face, stubble, eyes empty. I sat in the back row among a thicket of cameras and reporters. As the prosecutor read the charges, fraud, forgery, and aiding in unlawful transfer of assets, my heartbeat slowed. Gerald's lawyer cited a late-life crisis, said he was lost after retirement, and that Tessa exploited the emotions of a man searching for meaning. I looked down at my hands, not angry, just quietly sad. The man I once loved was being excused with cheap lines. He admitted part of the wrongdoing, hoping for leniency. I didn't look at him again. When the gavel came down, everything between us was truly over. Meanwhile, Avery and his financial team kept tracking the money drained from the Whitaker Hearth LLC account. After weeks, they identified nearly $2 million routed through multiple layers, shell companies, an account in the Caymans, then back to the U.S. Most of it was frozen in time thanks to the emergency court order. Avery filed the very day we set the trap. "If we'd been a night late, they would have moved it all," Avery said, relief and fatigue in his voice. I just answered softly, "It's all right, some of it's gone, but the part that matters most is still here." What mattered most wasn't money, it was the house. The divorce moved quickly. Both sides wanted it done. I signed my name again, steady, not angry, just ready to close the chapter. When the judge read the final clause, Blue Ridge Hearth Inn is recognized as a county heritage property. Any sale, transfer, mortgage, or restructuring must go through the Heritage Commission and have the consent of the legal owner, Mrs. Marion E. Whitaker. I looked up, feeling as if someone had laid the last brick to rebuild my life's foundation. After court, life slowly found a new rhythm. Noah and I sat in the living room, papers stacked in neat piles. "I think we should reopen Hearth Inn with a more welcoming angle," Noah said. "Not just a place to stay somewhere people can feel the history and hear the stories." I looked out the window, late sunlight over the pine porch, warm as those early years after Gerald and I married. "Hearth Inn has always had a soul," I said. "We just need to light it again." And we did. We reopened after 3 months of touch-ups, no flashy upgrades, no new sign. Just a small board by the door. Blue Ridge Hearth Inn, a place to come home to. Strangely, after all that turmoil, more guests arrived. Some came out of curiosity, but most stayed because they felt something real. They didn't ask me about the scandal. They asked about the stone walkway, the smell of morning waffles, the old fireplace I still light on winter nights. A young reporter came to write a house that survived a con piece. I just smiled. If you write it, write about stubbornness. Write about how a house can stand when the people inside don't fall. Noah and I didn't blast ads. We shared our story with kindness and details. Word spread, and Hearth Inn became a warm stop in the Blue Ridge. One day, I got a letter from the local culinary school. They asked if I'd partner on an internship program, students learning and serving guests. I said yes immediately. Each season, new young faces filled the kitchen, bright with laughter. One afternoon, I watched a brown-haired girl carefully set waffles on a tray. I told her, "Don't be afraid to mess up. Here, everything can be fixed, even small mistakes." She smiled, and I realized I was teaching what I had learned through tears. Perseverance. Hearth Inn settled back into its old rhythm, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't just an inn. It was proof that honesty and grit can survive. Many guests said they felt it as soon as they stepped onto the porch. I believe them. Every plank, every brick, every line in the guest book holds the spirit of what I fought for. Every night, once the house quieted, I walked the pine hallway. Warm yellow light pooled on the ceiling, my shadow stretching long across the old posts. I ran my hand along the wood, feeling each rough grain and hairline crack time left behind. They weren't flaws anymore, they were witnesses of endurance. Softly, almost to myself, I said, "I kept the house. I kept Hearth Inn, kept my honor, kept my peace. I kept my son's trust, the one thing money can never buy back." And when the mountain wind came down through the pines, I heard an answer in their whisper, gentle and steady, "And the house kept you too." That morning, fog draped the Blue Ridge slopes. Early winter air carried the damp scent of earth and fallen leaves, sad and warm at once. I was steeping peach tea when I heard a soft knock, 3 slow taps, hesitant, like the person outside wasn't sure. When I opened the door, a woman stood on the porch, a gray wool coat around a thin frame. She lifted her head, eyes deep and tired, but her voice steady. "Mrs. Whitaker, I'm Elaine Barlow, Tessa's mother." I stood still for a few seconds, then invited her in. No anger, just a distant feeling, like seeing a piece of my past I hadn't closed yet. We sat at the porch table where I'd shared so many mornings of coffee with Gerald. Weak sunlight slipped through the pines, mottling the tabletop. Elaine held the teacup. I set down, her hands trembling. "I know I have no standing to be here," she began, "but I need to apologize. I raised a daughter who was too ambitious. When I saw her succeed, I blindly believed any sacrifice was worth it. I didn't see the darkness in her until it was too late. I stayed quiet. Wind moved under the eaves, like the house sighing. Elaine said Tessa had always wanted to be above others. When Summit Vista hired her, Elaine proudly told neighbors her daughter worked for a major company. Then came expensive gifts, unexplained trips, and the growing cold in Tessa's eyes. That's when she understood her daughter had slipped too far. "You can hate me," Elaine said, voice catching, "but I'm not here to excuse her. I'm here because I know a mother's loss. And I want you to know, I never taught her to betray anyone." I exhaled softly. Years of anger and contempt aimed at another woman faded like smoke. I couldn't say I forgave, but I didn't hate anymore. We drank our tea in silence. The peach sweetness and warmth seeped into my chest. We talked about Mother's long winters, the nights waiting for a door that never opened, meals going cold around an empty chair. Elaine looked at me, kind and hurting. "Maybe we're not so different, Marion. The difference is you still have your home. I lost my child." I held her hand gently. Not to erase the past, but to acknowledge that a mother's pain wears the same colors. When Elaine left, I watched her fade into the fog and knew it was a meeting that needed no forgiveness to lighten the heart. In the days after, I noticed Noah smiling more. He talked often with Harper Quinn, a young architectural researcher staying to study historic timber work. Harper's soft brown hair and bright eyes followed a thick notebook everywhere. She spoke with excitement about mortise and tenon joints, about how the hearth-in porch was designed to catch morning sun and shed afternoon rain. I watched them on the porch, Noah leaning in to listen, Harper smiling, her voice moving like music. In the dimming light, they looked like two people rediscovering something lost. My heart, tight for so long, began to unclench. As for me, I relearned how to be alone without feeling empty. I started my journals again, not to complain, but to note small things: the smell of cinnamon toast, the kettle's first bubble, the wind threading through pine needles. Sometimes I sat by the fireplace for hours, writing a short line. "This morning the inn smelled like baked apples. Winter is here." Writing told me I was still living, still breathing with this house. One Saturday night, a folk band asked to play in the backyard. I said yes, only asked them to keep it gentle so guests could rest. But when the mandolin began and hand drums found a beat, people gathered, laughing and tapping their feet. Under the string lights, faces lit up, smiles passing from one to another. I stood on the steps and felt the inn breathe alive. Joyful. After years of strain, I finally felt truly at peace. That night, I called Noah into the office. I opened the old wood cabinet and took out the brass-locked box I call our treasure of keepsakes. Inside were yellowed photos, a silver spoon engraved with my mother's name, a few old letters from Gerald back when he was the man I loved, and the first notebook from when we built the inn. I handed Noah the key. "Not to burden you," I said, slow and sure, "but to root you. If you ever lose your way, open it. Every piece in here is a shard of this house's soul." Noah took it, eyes wet but grateful. "I promise I'll keep it the way you kept Hearth Inn." I smiled. I believed him. Late that night, once everyone slept, I stepped onto the porch again. A low crescent moon hung over the ridge, the wind bringing back the resin scent I knew by heart. I asked myself, if a letter came someday from Gerald, from Tessa, or from the girl I used to be, would I read it? I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't need to. Sometimes healing doesn't come from answers, but from learning to be quiet, to touch the present, and to smile. One early spring morning, dew still heavy on the lawn and daffodils just breaking the ground, the mail carrier handed me a thick envelope. The return corner read clearly, "North Carolina State Prison." My heart dipped. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter from Gerald. The handwriting, though shaky and slanted, was unmistakable, the same hand that once signed so many documents. He began with an apology, no excuses, no defense. He wrote, "Marion, I don't expect forgiveness, only that you read this. I was afraid of getting old, of people seeing me as useless, and I got obsessed with the idea of starting over. Only when I sat in a small cell and stared at a tiny square of sky through bars did I understand what I'd lost wasn't money. It was a home, a family, and you." I read slowly, hearing his old, low voice in my head. He wrote about the emptiness of jail nights, only metal sounds echoing back. He said the hunger to begin again blinded him, and the price was everything real. I sat on the lawn by the porch, the raw green scent of spring grass in the air. I read to the last line, then folded the letter carefully, like a keepsake finally put away. Inside, there was no hate left. Forgiveness, to me, doesn't mean forgetting. It means setting down the burden of anger on the old road and walking forward. I haven't forgotten what Gerald did, but I chose not to carry the rage anymore. On the town's spring market opening day, Noah, Harper, and I set up a small Hearth Inn booth. Harper led a group, telling the story of the roofline and the foundation stone set in 1982. Noah introduced a new menu, pecan pastries and honey peach tea flavors that make people feel welcome. I sat on the porch, watching the crowd flow in, hearing laughter and talk, feeling life return around me. I hung a new wind chime under the eaves. When the spring wind moved through, it rang and mingled with the pine's whisper. It was the sound of each new day, the sound of the freedom I'd fought to keep. That night, the backyard glowed. Guests circled the wood tables, children ran, a folk guitar strummed under a plain, honest voice. I stood in the middle of the yard, filled my lungs with warm pine and wood smoke, and listened to the wind against the porch and the bright bursts of laughter. Peace rose in me, rare and full. I understood. The life ahead is mine and belongs to the people I truly love. No more shadows, no more schemes. Only endurance, renewal, and the faith that even after the longest winter, spring returns. And if you, the one listening to my story, have stayed with me to this point, I want to say this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for sitting by the Hearth Inn fire, for hearing the storms and the calm that followed. May I ask, where are you watching from? A small town in America, or somewhere far away? Leave a comment and tell me what you think about justice and starting over. If you feel a connection, if you want to come back to this hearth each week where I'll keep sharing true stories from the heart, please hit subscribe and leave a like. Your company warms my whole yard and carries this wind chime song a little farther on the breeze. I bow in gratitude. Because of you, this journey isn't lonely anymore.